Kevin and I are going to talk to you today about a series of quick votes that are going to happen. And we need you to call your assembly members, your senators, and bang on their phones at their home office and Sacramento office as much as you have time with to tell them they work for you and you don't want these things to happen. Kevin, let's start with the state property and gun show issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a recycled idea, right? A continuously recycled idea. You've got Senate Bill 264 along with AB 311. And basically what they're doing is they're trying to take state-owned property away from anybody who wants to sell a firearm, which it's been done for decades now, right? You know, you go to your local fairgrounds who contracts with a show promoter, which means that they are subject to all sorts of regulations just to make sure that everything is safe. And you go and you get information, you get training, and you engage in the culture, and you might buy a firearm. And as they have been for a while now, they're continuously trying to take this away from us. And here's a couple pieces of legislation, again, that are taking another shot at it. And they're really targeting precursor parts and contracts with these two specific pieces of legislation. They've already been through committees. We had a lot of great volunteers calling in when they had the Senate committee hearing, letting them know exactly how we felt, and they pushed it through anyways, and they've come up here again.
You know, and one of the things in talking to a couple people, Kevin, about this, one guy says, well, how does this affect us in other areas? And this is the deal. You know, you basically have a total of about 200 people writing these laws and passing these laws from the governor's desk down to, you know, the office of the Assembly and Senate. And when you look at that, that's 200 people dictating the lives of 38 million Californians.
Yeah.
That's a very small amount. And what they're able to say is, oh, collectively, the majority of us don't like, and then insert whatever that thing is. And so we're going to legislate it out of existence. So, you know, fast forward a decade from now, they could use this as a precedent to say, oh, you own a classic car? Well, we're all about electric cars. So now you can't have car shows at state and county properties because, if I'm not mistaken, Senate Bill 264, while it says state properties, was expanded to include county properties.
Well, you know, this isn't the newest thing in the book, and if you've got to give credit where credit's due, there are several organizations out there, well, really many organizations out there that have a lot of financial backing that understand that grassroots efforts for a long time now can be effective, and that anti-Second Amendment grassroots effort that has a lot of real dark money behind it have done an incredible job at giving people what we would consider not the best information, creating zealots and getting them to local government meetings. And this is really, I mean, honestly, what CRPA has been trying to do over the last few years is really enhance that ground game because people at the local level can make a difference. And when it comes down to it, you know, we need to have people actually stepping up because our elected officials aren't doing that for us.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the problems too is that a lot of people who tend to be in our community or support our community are like, well, this is just so crazy stupid, it'll never happen. But they forget these are people that have been trained by the works of Saul Alinsky, you know, who preached just keep pounding the same thing and eventually the other side will give up. They'll just become weary. And that is something that you got to realize. A lot of these groups are backed by Maoist thoughts, are using Mao's old little red book to be like somehow this is new news. No, this is not only old news, it's scary news. Some of the people that are coming after our firearms, because if you ever know something about Mao, just using him as an example of one of the books that Bloomberg's groups and Soros's groups have been passing around, is that Mao took the weapons away from the people, but he sure did arm the biggest standing army in the world with some of the best weaponry.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I wonder why.
Surely this legislation wouldn't take armed security away from our politicians. What they're looking to do is take opportunities for individuals like you and me from purchasing firearms. So
wait, you must be talking about Nancy Pelosi, who goes to Sonoma up there, which is nothing bad happens in the wine country, gets to Sonoma. And Nancy Pelosi, who none of us need a firearm because it's safe. but she pulls up not in one, but 3 SUVs, and in 2 of them, you got armed guards that are carrying firearms that none of us would be allowed to have in California because she needs to go buy shoes, which is obviously one of the most unsafe things you could ever do and requires 8 personal body security guys with, military weaponry.
This contradiction is kind of one of the oldest one in the books. I just like when she's saying it's unsafe for us to be out and then she goes and gets a haircut, Why should firearms be any different than that?
Or like a governor who says, we should all stay home and safe and secure, but goes to the French Laundry.
Yeah. But again, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is pushing the ball forward. Right? And that's going to come with the ground game. We've got a lot of people, especially through our chapter programs, that are engaging local government, but we need to understand, conservatives in general, if you want to talk about national politics, have been slow to this game. Now, I've read plenty of articles or whatever you want to call it about how that swell is coming. We always seem to hear about how that swell is coming when you start looking forward at an election year, but we need to do it now. And fortunately, CRPA has been here. I've been working with our chapter program very much. I know you have too. But it's time to step up. If you do not look at yourself in the mirror and you want these things and you feel like you haven't stepped up, it's time to do that. And you can do that with this. Pick up the phone and call your senator or call your assemblyman. It'll take 5 minutes of your time, but you will tie up those offices so much to where they have to do something. And honestly, SB 264 is a great place to start because that culture goes way down if you take an opportunity for people to meet away from them. How else are we going to do this? Are we going to create phone networks for people to talk about their experience? People from Southern California aren't going to reach culture in Northern California that way. We do that through gun shows. Right. So we need to keep these as a practice in California. If anything, I've been to some of these local government meetings. They always talk about diversity. Okay, you're going to take gun shows away from these venues. That's decreasing diversity. That's not increasing diversity. These shows really want to stay diverse. They would keep these contracts, but with this legislation, they're not going to be able to. So it is time. It's time to start acting. It's time to start getting involved in that ground game. And if you can do that by just picking up the phone for 10 minutes and calling your senator and assemblyman, that's a pretty logically easy way to start, wouldn't you say?
Get in the battle zone. Which brings me to the next one. Assembly Bill 1237 is driving me nuts. We live in a world that, especially the last year of COVID, we've watched the federal government be hacked by multiple actors, both internally and externally. We've watched banking systems. We have a massive fuel shortage on the East Coast from a hack job. And we know that students have hacked the UC, the Cal State system numerous times to change grades and play games. And yet, what I'm being told is that Assembly Bill 1237, every time me or any of you watching buys a firearm, transfers a firearm, buys a firearms part, buys ammunition to use the firearm, that all my personal information that a sworn peace officer has to get a warrant for, somebody at the school at UC Davis will have open access. It's never been defined what the security is. And when they blow it and give it away to their leftist socialist friends to target our homes, to target us, to do anything, there is no penalty. There's no harm, no foul. This is literally putting us at risk. And people, Friday, they're going to vote. And if you want to stop it, we have 2 chances. Stop it in the assembly or the governor's desk and think about who your governor is. This fight is Friday.
Well, yeah, and that's really only half of the problem here. You have this information that, and let's be honest, the firearms community, we don't tend to like to be on lists, right?
Yeah.
But where's this information going? It's going to UC Davis. What do they do? Wait, in
UC Bloomberg?
Sure. Yeah. Whatever you want to call it. And it goes to research, right? It always goes to research. If you think that this is going to help the firearms community in any way, you're absolutely wrong. These are the places where they come out with studies about firearm homicides that end up having outrageously ridiculous, statistics and pieces of information that confuse people all up and down the state, that end up being used as arguments against pro Second Amendment legislation or arguments for anti-Second Amendment legislation up in the Capitol when they try to push these bills through. So aside from the personal aspect of your information basically being sold to somebody else, you also have this little bit of a grander idea of the fact that it's going to a place where they are going to, on a larger scale, try to harm you as well. So if there is a reason to not want your information going out there personally as well as culturally, this is a bill that you really need to pay attention to and fight against.
Kevin, you make an excellent point. I want to break this down for everybody. I mean, when it comes to research, there is what I would call honest research, which is probably, I would argue, maybe 20% of all research, which is where you come up with a premise and then you go test that premise and you research it to find out if it's right or wrong. The other 80% of research is financed by companies that, like you just said, Kevin, they want an outcome. You can look to the old cola wars between Pepsi and Coke, both going after their artificial sweeteners, both claiming to cause cancer. One of them, I forget which one it was, but it was like literally you and I would have to drink 80 cans of Coke to have what happened to the rat. And, I mean, it was just ridiculous, but they were able to put that information out to try to sway people to the other product. We've seen that with car companies. We've seen that with military industry doing that to each other. So when Kevin's talking about this, they're literally going to take this, quote, research to act like it's scientifically based of why you can't do what you want to do. And it's going to be totally made up.
Yeah, they have a conclusion. They already have their conclusion, and they are looking for statistics to support that conclusion. If they can't find it, that information and their money ends up going to waste, but more than likely, they're going to be able to find something that in some twisted way is going to be able to support their conclusion. And again, it only ever comes to the detriment of the firearms community. So this is definitely not a good bill.
And then that brings us to how I started off. I said that we didn't like it when good old England said we couldn't have representation. And the very biggest thing, and I'm going to bring this up because I found this so funny. When I went and visited George Washington's home in Mount Vernon, one of the things they talked about is George Washington, after he had been president, said, basically, God help us if anybody ever tries to raise taxes above 3% because that's grounds for a revolution. That was George Washington. So think about that for a moment. Whether you're pro-tax or not tax, we're well above 3%. And here comes Assembly Bill 1223. We're in one of the two highest tax states already in the 50 states. And what do they want to do? Now tax firearms and ammunition with an additional 10 to 11% tax. That's right, another 10 to 11%. So when you get paid, you get taxed out the rear end here in California. So now you only have maybe 2/3 of your dollar. Then when you go to buy something, you're paying an additional tax, both sometimes in your community as well as the state tax. And now they're going to, like Kevin, I get 45 cents now on my dollar if this thing goes through, if I'm buying anything firearms related.
Well, yeah, but I mean, let's also not forget the fact that this discussion within our legislature came at a time where there was a technical difficulty where organizations like CRPA couldn't even get in front of these people. We're in a time of COVID where they're not meeting with us. So if you want to go back to why that original revolution started, taxation without representation, sure, we don't like taxes. I don't want to see a 200% increase in my tax for firearms, but at the same time, they are not allowing us to represent ourselves to the legislature. And again, like I said, that original revolution, taxation without representation, that is exactly what we have with this bill. And again, what it comes down to is the ground game. We've got to talk to our legislators. We have to call them, tie up their phone lines, make sure they understand this is unacceptable behavior because they're supposed to be representing us. They are only representing themselves. They are not representing us, and they need to get out.
And when we talk about moving the ball forward, hold them accountable because supposedly, like on AB 1223, these taxes are to help keep all of us safe. Really? Because we already pay taxes to a thing called the California Department of Justice, which has a system known as the APPS that tells them where there's felons that are not allowed to have firearms because they've committed heinous crimes that have firearms. Now, this isn't a couple of people, folks. This is 20,000 people, and they don't arrest them. But what they've done is they brought all the bills that we've talked about you and then some for one purpose, to make the law-abiding citizen have to pay more, have less, and to restrict who they are and to put them at risk, while meanwhile, where they know the criminal element is, that's a threat to all 38 million Californians, they're doing nothing about. So when you call on SB 264, Assembly Bill 311, Assembly Bill 1237, and Assembly Bill 1223, which will be down in the comments, make sure you also remind them they have some laws that they need to start getting enforced. Hold those people accountable and say, I don't like 20,000 felons with guns not being removed off the streets.
I mean, the only thing that I can really think of is that, I was a youngster, but I remember when gas was less than $1 a gallon. And California seems to be pretty okay back then. These taxes are ridiculous. I mean, really, anything that you see in the legislature having to do with safety and firearms today is about the exact opposite. And I mean, honestly, leave a comment. What was your favorite firearm when gas was less than $1 a gallon? Because it seemed pretty okay back then. We seem to get by pretty okay. I feel like we could do without these taxes today just fine.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as always, remember, be safe, shoot straight, and fight back for your rights.